Hello, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of The Wake Up. My name is Spencer Ross. Thank you so much for joining us. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We're talking about the Iowa State Fair, the latest from Jeffrey Epstein, and some of the stuff that happened over the weekend over at the investigations with El Paso, and how these conspiracy theories are really ramping up in two separate areas of all that are soon bound to come together. All right, we're going to get into all that today, so thank you so much for joining us. And we start with a trip to Iowa for the state fair. A lot of stuff going on, from chomping on a giant roasted turkey leg at the Iowa State Fair to breaking down into tears on stage at the Every Time for Gun Safety Forum. Democratic presidential candidates, and especially businessman Andrew Yang, had an emotional roller coaster of a weekend. It mirrored the ride from silly to serious taken by most of the 2020 Democratic field as candidates vacillated between engaging in performative rites of passage and discussing more serious topics like gun control and whether President Trump is a white supremacist following shootings in Dayton and El Paso. Washington Post with the dispatch there. And on Saturday, 16 Democrats appeared at Everytown's day-long forum on gun violence down the road from the fair, where they discussed implementing a federal licensing system, expanding universal background checks, and banning assault weapons, and enacting red flag laws. Honestly, I think if you were there and you're a Democrat trying to run for president, there should be absolutely inexcusable as to why you're not there. I just don't get why you're not there with the issue of mass shootings. I mean, really got to have a good reason for why you're not there. With the issue of mass shootings being what it is, and the fact that people really need to see some change on this issue because it's really destroying and tearing apart a lot of people's lives. It's not good. It just really isn't good. But Yang cried on stage after a woman who lost her 4-year-old daughter to a stray bullet asked how he'd address unintentional shootings by children. This is another interesting thing that a lot of people don't really get asked that often. I have a 6 and 3-year-old boy, Yang said. I was imagining it was one of them that got shot and the other saw it. I'm so sorry. It's very, very, very graphic image there, to say the least, from Yang. Democrats weighed in on how they had addressed mass shootings that killed 31 and placing blame on Trump and the NRA. People say to me, did Donald Trump cause those folks to be killed? Kamala Harris said, well, no, of course, he didn't pull the trigger, but he's been certainly tweeting out the ammunition, which in my opinion is really a great way of looking at it because, as I've talked about many times, both here and on Newsflash, if you want to go check that out, it is very, very, very important to keep in mind some of the things that he's tweeting, some of the rhetoric that he's saying, and how it works its way through more radical pipelines. And, of course, it ends up being some of the same rhetoric that comes through 4chan, 8chan, Daily Stormer, coming from Breitbart, Fox News, and President Donald Trump, that inspires some of these most hateful rhetorics, most hateful events, and some of the most hateful mass shootings that take place. It's very, very rough to see. If 20 years from now there's a candidate forum, says Pete Buttigieg, shame on us, God help us, if 20 years from now there's a candidate forum with presidential candidates in the aftermath of mass shootings, a day-to-day beat of daily shootings, saying, okay, what are we going to do to make sure it's different this time? Said Pete Buttigieg, let's not let that happen. It's a good point. There's a tipping point that's been reached. I feel it out there, says Amy Klobuchar, expressing optimism that momentum is moving in favor of gun reform, which is interesting. Reconvene the United States Senate now, says Bernie Sanders. If Mitch McConnell wants to vote against gun safety legislation, let him vote against it, but reconvene the United States Senate. Let's have the discussion. Let's have that vote. Do what the American people want. Joe Biden also showed up and followed his appearance with a New York Times op-ed calling for a new assault weapons ban. following the one he helped implement in 1994 as senator, which is one of the few good things he's done in the Senate, in my opinion. We have a huge problem with guns. Assault weapon, military-style firearms designed to spread rapidly are a threat to our national security, and we should treat them as such. Anyone who pretends there's nothing we can do is lying, and holding that view should be disqualifying for anyone seeking to lead our country, which is a great way of looking at it. When the issue here is so solvable, it's right in front of us. We can just reach out and grab it. Elizabeth Warren released her gun control plan with the role of reducing gun deaths by 80% through executive action and legislation. We've got to have a leader who's willing to stand up to the gun lobby and say no more, and to take away one of their principal tools, which is the filibuster, she told NPR's Asma Khalid. The sweeping proposal for increased taxes on manufacturers and a $100 million annual investment in gun violence research was very, very convincing. I think it's definitely interesting to see some of Elizabeth Warren's planning there on that, and I think it's really simple. There's a lot of routes you can go. I think the question is, what do you do first? Do you go big? I think you just got to get whatever you can get, because any really gun reform at this point would be very, very shocking and surprising and unlikely. But I mean, if you get some red flag laws passed, I mean, I really don't think they would be that big a deal, because they don't really threaten or take away the issue of guns as a whole. They don't threaten guns in America and threaten our addiction to guns in America as a whole yet, which I think is very, very prevalent and needs to be taken down a notch. But I mean, they're definitely a first start. I don't think they really can hurt. So 6 candidates: Warren, Sanders, Harris, Cory Booker, and Julian Castro, as well as Christian Gillibrand, called on Walmart to stop selling guns. Also, the Washington Post has a special 12-page print section that lists every mass shooting victim since 1966, which is quite a lot. 54 years, 165 mass shootings, and 1,196 victims, which is, wow. It's insane. And these are ones that have... these are some of the major ones. There's been a lot more, I think, that kind of go under the radar. So on Friday night at the annual Iowa Wingding fundraiser hosted by 25 Northern Iowa Democratic parties and the local candidates, the mood among the 2020 grads who flocked to the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake was again somber and emotionally charged. Their calls to defeat Trump and unify the country took on greater weight Friday following a week in which racism and gun violence has driven national conversation after multiple mass shootings, says Brianne Pfaffenstiel from the Des Moines Register. This is not a referendum on the one guy in office, Booker said. This is a referendum on us and who we are going to be to each other. This is one of those moral moments in our nation that's going to define the character of our country, and this is a week where I will not let the slaughter of our fellow citizens disappear within the next media cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, it's up to all of us, 330 million Americans, who have to do what the president can't. Biden told the crowd, and again, these guys both sound like they're trying to be Obama here. Don't boo, votes, like that kind of thing. Apparently, the loudest applause of the night, interestingly enough, went to Pete Buttigieg, who declared in a fiery speech that white nationalism and national security threat to our country. He also appeared to offer a contrast to Biden's stated belief that defeating Trump will solve the country's most immediate problems, saying we can't look like the party of back to normal. So that's going to be a very, very important thing. Like the fact that, again, wow. So that is, again, very, very demented to me. It's in its view of politics. It's just like, no, like you gotta understand there, and I think what Biden gets so wrong, the fundamental disagreement that I have with him about this is the fact that if Trump just goes away, there will be no more problems. Trump was the root of the problems. He's nothing really caused Trump. He just came out of nowhere. There was no deeper underlying anger at the system that Trump caused or Trump brewed. And if we get rid of Trump, everything will be fine. We won't need to worry about anything again. I think that's just so ridiculous. I don't even know where to begin with that, because it's like, of course not. Of course not. There was some real anger at the system. That's why he won. That's why he was able to push up so far, because he was saying the right things, getting under the right people's skin with the right words. And those issues, I think, really need to be addressed. And there is a deeper resonance for why they are. So it's very, very important. There was also some fun to be had, though, and food to be eaten. Bernie ate a corn dog, by-night ice cream, etc., etc. Harris ate the traditional pork chop on a stick. Booker, though, managed to find something more than deep-fried meat. He made his way to the veggie table, according to the Des Moines Register, Katie Akin, and ordered a gluten-fried peanut butter and jelly sandwich on a stick, which one employee said was one of the few vegan items that they offered. The candidates also climbed onto the Des Moines Register's soapbox stage. Warren, who is now, I believe, second behind Biden, some polls pulling up, seemed to draw the biggest crowds of the weekend, and she talked about her wealth tax, which is interesting. So Kamala Harris, who up to her presence in the state, was also trailed by a crowd of reporters, cameras, supporters, and staff, and even some hecklers that chatted her across the state fairgrounds, testified to a rising presence in the state, which is interesting because the thing is, she doesn't really, she has, and all the candidates here, really, when they're walking around the state grounds, just one big field where there's some of the most, well-known people in the country, going after, looking through things, people who are running for president, and there's no walls between them. And if you really want, you could run up on them. If you're like Charlie Kirk, if you're any right-wing activist, you could just go, or left-wing activist for that matter, or anyone, anywhere ever. You could yell questions at them, make them really uncomfortable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is always interesting and why the Iowa State Fair is really different, especially when there's a lot of candidates there, really different from other state events. So, yeah, just events politically in general. There's no fundraisers with their closed doors and they can kick you out. It's all open, all in the field, and very much on there. So, Biden is leading the Cast Your Kernel poll, though, with 24% of support from fair attendees who cast their corn kernels in a jar. Gillibrand's son Henry took a little too much time for his mother's liking, which is funny. Here's audio of that, which you gotta love kids. I don't know. Oh, you can't hear him. So he's pretty much trying to decide who should pick, but we were on that. Yeah, she was pretty much about to go in there and pick Elizabeth Warren right in front of her mom. Right in front of his mom. That's Christian Gillibrand's son there, about to pick Elizabeth Warren, which is kind of funny. So a little bit awkward. Anyway, we now turn from the campaign out into the agencies where officials are defending the Mississippi raid. Acting Customs and Border Patrol Protection Commissioner Mark Morgan said Sunday that the mass immigration raids in Mississippi workers last week were not raids. Disputing the terminology that's been used widely to describe the operations, McLennan says the timing was unfortunate. Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McLennan, meanwhile, said that he regretted the timing of the raids, which were carried out just days after a mass shooting in which a gunman killed 22 people at El Paso Walmart. Morgan was unfazed by the viral video. That's CBP Commissioner Mark Warren. I know it's emotional. I know it's done on purpose to show a picture like that. Like, they're trying to get to us. We can't let them stop us from getting more children. Okay, guys? We can't let them stop us. Nick Myroff of the Washington Post also flew with ICE on a charter flight of 93 deportees to Guatemala last week, a glimpse into the effort the administration wants to increase, potentially turning the country into kind of reverse Ellis Island or repository far from the U.S. border for those the United States has rejected, which is pretty much everybody. We now turn to the courts where new Epstein details are emerging. Financier and alleged sex offender Jeffrey Epstein was supposed to have been checked by the two guards in the protective housing unit every 30 minutes, but the procedure was not followed on Saturday night when he died by apparent suicide. Epstein was left alone despite recently being on suicide watch. The jail had recently transferred his cellmate and allowed Epstein to be housed alone, a decision that violated the jail's procedures, two officials told the Times. The guards were working overtime, which probably was a bit of a problem. to say the least. The two correctional officers assigned to watch a special unit in the detention center where financier and sex offender Epstein was being housed, said Matt Zapotsky and Devlin Baird of the Washington Post, were working overtime, and one forced to do so by management, and the other on a fourth or fifth consecutive day, the president of the local union for jail staffers said Sunday. The jail is severely understaffed. Serene Gregg,